Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Gentlemen Prefer Cinephiles. We're here to talk about a particular movie from the 70s called Network. Now, Network, it's crazy how much is packed into this film in terms of the 70s, in terms of the women, in terms of the men, in terms of, media, etc., etc. So Network is such an important film for American cinema especially. It's just, it won like 4 Academy Awards. It was crazy. It was Faye Dunaway's win for Best Actress, I think. And it says so much in terms of women, in terms of men, in terms of this new era of society for United States culture. It says a lot for media and how media functions in our culture. However, today we're going to be talking particularly about the kind of new woman that Network shows. And I say new woman because the roots of this go very far back. It goes back all the way to the Blue Angels. So I love to start with that before we get into the specific topic we're talking about. And I'd love to come back to Network to talk about something else too, if you guys are interested in that. But so Network and the New Woman. Now, what does the New Woman mean? The very first kind of New Woman iteration in cinema that I see is Maria in Metropolis. You have this relationship between the good woman and the hypersexualized woman, and that kind of comes to a head a little bit later on in German cinema with the Blue Angel and Marlene Dietrich in particular. So in the Blue Angel, you have Marlene Dietrich and Emil Jannings. You have Marlene Dietrich and Emil Jannings, both kind of representing two parts of German society. During the Blue Angel, as we went over in our episode, it's Weimar Germany. It's Weimar Germany, and there's this clashing of old age tradition and new age, freedom, and like the jazz movement and cabaret culture, all those types of things that represent kind of this new age of individual, new age of person. And Marlene Dietrich in this scenario represents the new woman. She's a cabaret performer who becomes successful and becomes someone because she is a new woman for a new age, and she understands this new age, and she's in a place where she can succeed in this new age. Whereas Emil Jannings, by the end of the Blue Angel, spoiler alert, he ends up dying because he can't keep up with that, because he's a man from a different time and a man from a different age, and it just is a cinematic representation of kind of that passing on of that old era, I suppose, So that's where the New Woman kind of originates from in cinema as a whole. And it's an archetype that not a lot of people really discuss in terms of old age versus new age, I suppose, because I think right now we're trying to decide how women are being portrayed in media, and it's in this very transitional space. Now, this strongly relates to Network, not only thematically, but Network brings up the Blue Angel multiple times in terms of discussion of Faye Dunaway's character. So Faye Dunaway's character, she's having a relationship with a man named Max, and eventually he's unable to kind of accept her relationship to her work. And kind of this character Faye Dunaway represents so many questions about the new woman of the 70s and the new woman of this era, because this was a really significant time for women's rights, for feminism, for et cetera, et cetera. And Faye Dunaway's character represents so many questions that I think we still have to answer, so many things that we need to answer, like just so many things about the woman and the new woman that is so interesting that not a lot of people talk about. And so in this breakup between the two, they have an affair for most of the movie, and it's pretty much at the climactic point of the film that they both break up with each other. And it's, it's brought up that this is pretty much the Blue Angel, and he's Unrat, and it's pretty much brought up Max in a very reflective and self-aware way. Max brings up the Blue Angel to compare their relationship to, and he's not okay with suffering the same fate as the old man in the Blue Angel, so he decides to just leave Faye Dunaway's character. So that has a lot packed into it already, but I think something that this hits on. So the entire movie, Faye Dunaway's character is very devoted to her job. She's the only woman in the room, and visually this represents the ideological notion of the glass ceiling and what women are allowed to break the glass ceiling. 1, how do women break the glass ceiling? 2, and what happens when women break the glass ceiling? Because you have Faye Dunaway's character lose herself in her work in one way that it could be argued, but I think that's a little bit of an oversimplification of her character. And I think those questions all are very relevant now and are very significant and things we should be discussing a lot more. I think in a lot of ways the character brings up the question, what happens if women break the glass ceiling, if we've defeminized ourselves and we're the exact same as men? You know, what's the difference between a man being in power and a woman being in power if a woman loses all parts of her womanhood to be successful? And that's not to say women can't be tomboys or anything like that. That's a completely separate discussion. This is saying a repression of feminine traits to appease a patriarchal society, you know? And it's like, that question Faye Dunaway deals with throughout the film. And I mean, I don't think films necessarily are seeking answers or seeking to fix something or seeking to answer something. So these are just questions that the film brings up. Another kind of element of that is, why is it so bad for a woman to be so immersed in her work and to be so dedicated to her work? Why is that so bad? Like, what is the issue with that? Like, why does that turn men away? And what's the dynamic between a man that is not threatened by women in power, by a woman in power or women in power, and what's the difference between a man that is threatened by women in power? Like, all of those questions network kind of boils down to Faye Dunaway's character, and she really illuminates a lot for that. Because if I'm being completely honest, like, I mean, when you look at the events of the narrative, the success of the cable network is because of Faye Dunaway's character, because of her understanding, because of her perspective as a woman, because of her ability to get in the door and break the glass ceiling and come out on top and be powerful, you know. And I think in a little bit of an outdated way, the film kind of creates this conclusion, and I don't know if this is me looking at it through a reception theory lens and reading it in a way that it wants to be read, or if this is what, but it kind of takes... Some people have a perception of the film that because Faye Dunaway loses out on Max and loses out on a man that she loves, that somehow she loses something. You know, she can't have it all, I guess. She's going to pick her career or the man. But I think in a lot of ways it instead of showing, oh man, what a terrible woman who didn't understand life and didn't understand relationships, I think instead of that, I think what the film is really trying to show is, why does a woman have to choose when a man doesn't have to, you know? I think, but then again, that just might be me reading this through a reception theory lens, but Network really made me think of, you know, I had this own moment with myself where for so long I was repressing my femininity because in a way society acts like it makes you weak in some way. You know, it acts like because you're feminine, you're automatically viewed as prissy, you're automatically viewed as non-intelligent, you're automatically viewed as, you know, why do you care about your hair so much when you can care about other things? You know, and there's so much packed into hyper-femininity that we're not able to express. So being a feminine woman in success is so important to me because it's like, why do I have to... What's, like I said earlier with the question of breaking the glass ceiling, if I defeminize myself, if I fit myself into the box that men are in society, because I mean, patriarchal society doesn't just affect women, it affects men too. If I put myself in those boxes and if I succeed on society's terms, have I really succeeded? Have I really broken the glass ceiling if I've just actually masked myself to fit, this society that's around me, I suppose? And Network and Faye Dunaway's character really showcase that, and I have a lot of respect for her character for letting go and not, you know, for letting go of the relationship, I suppose. And while the film ends with, you know, this assassination of the Howard Beale show's main attraction, Howard Beale, you know, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore. And while Faye Dunaway does give into this societal pressure, I suppose, that she's under, it's still so interesting to me, and I still have so much respect for her for holding on to some type of femininity and holding on to herself, I suppose, throughout all of this. And, you know, because, you know, Max gives her an ultimatum, and he he pretty much is like, choose me or choose your job, and she doesn't choose him. And even that in and of itself is such a strong political statement for women and for what women can be successful, and it breaks so many boundaries in terms of showcasing in media what women can be successful, et cetera, that I think that Network is such a huge first step in how women are portrayed in the media, and it's just so well done, and she totally deserved her Oscar for it. Yes, Diana. But anyway, those are my ramblings about Network. I think it's a fantastic movie. I could also go more in depth about the media side of it, because I mean, the way it showcases media and the way it goes through ratings and, you know, what the public shows and how that dynamic works, how figures in media affect the public, and how then again this creates this like almost parasitic relationship between celebrity and public imagery and, you know, what the public actually wants and what the public actually feels. It's just so interesting. And then what the public is interested in, you know what I mean? Like the assassination that happens, it fixes ratings, and it's so and it's a high point, you know? It's a high point for the show in a low point for like humanity, I suppose. So those dynamics are also really interesting to talk about in terms of Network, and I'd love to come on for another episode to do that. But as always, you can find us, Gentlemen for Cinephiles, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can watch us on YouTube or, you know, Spotify, iTunes, etc., etc. You can follow me at _RenaissanceWoman on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter. And yes, I'd love to connect with you, see what you're thinking. I am so sorry I wasn't posting again, so here I am posting.